Hey everyone,
Hey there, folks.
this is Amanda,
And this is Rita.
and you're listening to
I Don't Know Her,
the podcast where we talk about women and some other people that you don't know.
And today you will.
Yeah. So I have a little story to tell you.
Okay.
So just FYI, I haven't seen Rita in like 2 weeks.
Yes, they went on a trip.
Yeah, I went to Seattle and for an appointment, and then I came back, and then it was just hectic and busy. So it's been a minute. So I have a story to tell you about a coworker.
Okay.
So first off, I finally bit the bullet and sent out an all-staff email and said, my name is this. These are my pronouns.
Good. I mean, if it goes beyond that on their end, then fuck that.
Yeah, and it's technically like against the law, you know, so if they make a mistake, whatever, but if you're intentionally misgendering me, that's a problem. So I was with a coworker who I'm working on a project with. We'll just say that. We're working on a project, and we were hanging out, and she on her own brought up how there are all of these really terrible laws being passed in all of these red states where they're trying to restrict trans athletes' access to sports, specifically trans girls. And she was like, I just can't even imagine, like, why you would ever do that. Why would you ever want to, like, these kids just want to play sports. Like, just let them play sports. And I was like, well, if there's ever going to be a time to talk about my pronouns with her, this is it. Because she doesn't work in my building, so she didn't get the email.
Okay.
So I said, hey, yeah, I'm non-binary, and my pronouns are they, them. And she was like, oh, yeah, I saw that this summer when you announced it on Instagram.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Fully aware.
So you're aware and have just been deciding actively to misgender me for the last month that we've been working together.
Okay.
That's cool. I was already a little bit thrown aback by that. And then she said, yeah, I think that they, them is just weird.
What? To your face.
Not that being non-binary is weird. It's just they, them is weird. I can't do it.
That was the finishing of the sentence that she said. Okay. Okay. That's so fucking stupid.
And I was like, what? And she was like, you know, as an English teacher, that argument just chaps my ass.
That's just a cop-out. That's a fucking excuse and your unwillingness to try to just try.
and it's also not even true. Like, we have been using they and them as a stand-in for a person's pronouns when we don't know who they are, for instance, forever. If I was talking to you about my neighbor, I was like, my goddamn neighbor and their chickens, I'm saying there, right? And then you would say, well, how long have they had the chickens? And we would have a totally normal conversation about this person because you don't know them, and you would use a gender neutral pronoun when you don't know who you're talking about. So it's not like this is like rocket science. It's part of our everyday lexicon anyway. Yeah, it's just it's a plural pronoun. That's the problem. That's what she said.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, well, just try. Just work at it.
Please.
And it honestly, it like really threw me for a loop. It made me feel like she had acknowledged my coming out experience, and instead of deciding that she wanted to respect it, she in fact wanted to do the opposite.
Yeah. And just saying the fact that, oh, I think it's weird, it means that you're not comfortable with it. You don't understand it, but you're not even willing to even go there.
Yeah. I will say that today I saw her and she was like, you'll be happy to know I use they, them pronouns today.
Good fucking for you. Here's your goddamn gold star.
I know. I was
you
like,
already
do you
made
want
me
a
feel
cookie?
bad.
Like, what? It was so weird. And she's a whole different generation. She's much older than me. And like, I guess I should be glad that today she decided to use my correct pronouns, but it was just a real not great experience. And especially because I sent out that email to my staff, and immediately the first teacher that I had a class in the library with used she, her pronouns the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that's just been every day. And it just feels like, okay, I wear a pronoun pin every day. I have now publicly sent out a public mass email. I have it in my signature of every email I ever write. I put it on Zoom calls when I'm in a staff meeting. Like, what else am I supposed to be doing here?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just very frustrating at the moment.
Paint yourself red and set off dynamite? Is that the next?
I guess. Tattoo it on my cheek. Like 6ix9ine or whatever his name is.
Yeah. For me, like I think I had posted something either on my Facebook or Instagram. I was like, even if you're, cisgender or however you identify, if you are he, him, or she, her, just include it in your everyday vocabulary, because then it creates an equal space for all of us to be able to share our pronouns and not make that person feel like they have to do that, make a banner or something and fly it over the city. It's like, just include it in your verbiage, or like your emails, at the very end, or on your Facebook profile,
on your bios.
And I was really happy because I did see some people who changed it that day and added it to their stuff, and I was like, cool, like I like that.
Yeah, it is really helpful. I want to be clear that like I know people are going to make mistakes, and that's natural and normal, and I understand. Does it suck when somebody makes a mistake? Obviously. But like, just correct yourself and keep going forward. I have made mistakes with my friends, with some of my students. I have done it myself. Like that, it isn't, when you are intending, when you have good intent and you're really trying hard, people notice. Like, I notice when people are doing their damnedest to try to get it right.
Mm-hmm.
And it is more difficult for some people than other people. And it generally is kind of like an age thing, where some folks of certain ages have a harder time with it. And I get that. I don't begrudge somebody it like taking time for them to get used to it. But I do have a problem with people who just outright won't try.
Yeah, that's
or
me.
Like, that's weird to me.
Yeah. Or they're just like so dismissive about it. And I was comparing it to like, what's your name, Steve? No, you're Brian.
Yep, I'm just going to call you Brian. That's your name now.
That's your name. That's how I feel your name should be. That's how ridiculous that is.
I've decided that your name is Brian, and so that's how I'm going to call you. So anyway, I think it's important for everyone who's out there in general in the world, like, be mindful of that kind of stuff. It is really painful to just constantly feel like you're being dismissed and disrespected on purpose.
Mm-hmm. Ugh.
Yeah.
I respect you.
I know you do. Thank you. And we've had some really great, conversations ourselves, and also great conversations on the show. And we've had really supportive audience members as well. So I really appreciate all the support I get. I definitely have plenty of good support, but currently at the moment, it's just feeling real heavy.
Yeah.
Because my everyday, all day work is just constant.
Yeah. Ugh. You can't take it to HR or something like that?
I could.
One step at a time?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like, that's real aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what you would do about that.
Well,
what do you have for me?
Are you ready for a story?
I am ready.
Okay. Do you know who Sybil Stockdale is?
I have no idea who that is.
She's an activist and the founder of the League of Families.
The League of Families?
Mm-hmm. I had no idea what this was.
I don't even know what that is.
I knew who her husband was. 100%.
Uh-oh.
And then I was like, would she what? What did she do?
Uh-oh. I feel like I'm going to be in for a ride now. Okay.
All right. Sybil was born to Sydney, and this name is a little different. Lucretia?
Oh, yeah, Lucretia, probably.
Is that Greek or Italian?
I don't know.
I'm not sure. Hopefully I got that right. Their last name is Bailey, and she was born in East Haven, Connecticut on November 25th in 1924. Her family made a living by working at Bailey Dairy, operated by her father and uncle. As a young girl, she worked for the family dairy as well. Putting in hard work was rewarded with really long, fun summers. She said her family would go boating, they'd go swimming. They made a pretty decent wage. I mean, a dairy, that's pretty good money. Like where I grew up, like I remember all the kids that their families had dairies. They were fucking rich.
Yeah. I think dairy is hard because it has a lot of overhead, but if you're doing it right, you got a good moneymaker, yeah.
So with that, they were able to get a really nice cottage on Long Island Sound. I don't know where that is, but I want a cottage next to some water.
Yeah, I know. I was just thinking like on a sound. That sounds great.
Yeah, boating, fishing, swimming.
Yep.
Laying in the sun.
Laying in the sun. Beach reading.
Yes.
Oh.
I think I've got the itch for summer already. I want some water.
Yeah, I really, like, we have lived in this area for 8 years or whatever, 10 years. I don't even know when I've moved here. A long time ago. And I still don't have a good friend with a lake place, and that needs to be remedied.
Okay,
I need
that's
a
our
friend
goal.
with a lake place.
We're going to find someone who owns a dairy. We're going to get that cottage.
And I want a friend with a lake place so that we can go have, like, time at the lake.
Water hangs. Well, she loved to dance. She took ballet and tap. She said if she had longer legs and a more liberated mother, she would have run away and been a rockette. After high school, she attended and graduated Mount Holyoke College and taught at St. Catherine's School. It's an all-girls school in Richmond. What is VA? Is that
Virginia?
Virginia.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, you caught
Also,
me.
is she white?
She is white.
Okay.
Sybil taught modern dance and medieval history, the weirdest two subjects to teach, I think.
Yeah, modern dance and medieval history. Those are not even closely related in any way.
She also was a day driver for her students. She'd go pick up students and bring them to school and then take them home.
Like a bus driver?
Almost like they would go pick up students and bring them to school and then take them home.
That's an odd...
She also was a chaperone, though, and a study hall monitor. So maybe she was facilitating making sure the girls got home.
I hope she got paid for all those extra duties.
Yeah, chaperone and study hall monitor does not sound like
fun.
the greatest.
Nope.
She shared a small apartment in Richmond with a roommate named Bibi, and the two were living their best life with in the social sense. The area that they lived in received a rush of very good-looking single men who had all just returned home from World War II. She said that Bibi would joke and say, "So many men, so little time."
Oh, well, I could... We were just talking about our hoe phases before.
Oh, yeah. Hoe phase is a good
They're
phase.
living their best hoe phase life.
There you go. On one of their outings, Sybil was going out with her friends, and she was set up on a blind date with a couple of servicemen. One of the men was a man named James Bond Stockton. Yes, his name is James Bond. And this was before
James Bond.
The real James Bond, too. It was an instant attraction. They hadn't really decided like what girl was going to go with what guy, but she threw herself in front of him and was like, "I'm Sybil. Hi."
Hello. Hello there.
Jim was a Navy officer, and in 1947, the couple got engaged. They had a pretty fast whirlwind romance. She said she got really distracted with the relationship. She was like messing up at work.
Oh, yep.
She was missing
that young love, that new young love.
Where you're just having so much sex. You're like, "I'm late.
Yeah.
I was supposed to be in class an hour ago."
And all you think about is that person. You just want
yeah.
to be like in their presence, eating them alive, I guess. Yeah. I don't know. It's so wild.
It's like an obsession almost. You're just sick in love.
You are. It does feel like a sickness.
Oh, yeah. Well, she started missing classes that she was supposed to teach.
Oh, of course.
And she missed faculty meetings and preparing assignments for her students to do.
Oh, she's just seriously fallen down on the job.
So she decided that if she was to become an officer's wife, she felt like she needed to quit her job and focus on being a wife. The reason she decided to do this was because she had been handed a copy of The Navy Wife. Have you heard of that book?
No, but it sounds enraging.
I had no idea that this material existed, not only for Navy, but for military, like Army, all of it. There are manuals, certified material, detailing the protocols that women who marry naval officers should follow.
Wait, is this not written by somebody random? It is like...
You're engaged to a naval officer, here's your book.
Like from the Navy?
Yep. This is what you're supposed to do.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Is that still a thing?
I looked it up. The book is still around. There's updated
but they still
versions.
Don't do it. They
I
don't do it now?
I don't think they hand it to you, no, but the book is still available.
Okay, listeners, you have to tell me. If you or someone you know is a military spouse, are you required to read a book about etiquette? I must know. I have to know.
Yeah, it's like a manual for wives.
Gross.
It tells you how, what is expected of you etiquette-wise, how you should physically appear, how to go above and beyond to have a good home for your husband and support your Navy husband who needs to come home to a nice, clean house.
Ugh. I hate that.
I found it strange.
Well, it's not only strange, it's also just so misogynistic.
It is.
It's like, you don't get to have an identity. Your identity is Navy wife. Mm-hmm. That's your whole existence. You exist to serve him.
Exactly. Well, she read the book and she thought, well, if this is what I need to be with him, I'll do it. And this is 1947 when they get married. Mm. So I'm imagining the time was probably very supportive of her just falling into that role.
Yeah. Women were supposed to be at home.
Yeah. They moved to a naval base in Pensacola, Florida. They got married. She was a socialite. They had 4 kids. They ended up having 4 sons.
That's a lot of boys.
That's a lot of boys. That's a lot of milk, honestly.
Can you
in the
imagine?
fridge, all the bread and the meat they probably eat.
Oh God, 4 of your son?
No, I would.
You'd be broke.
They would eat me at a house. So she would host like these really grand parties. There were brunches. There was tea time. There was, skirt suits, pearls.
Oh yeah, this is like some Mad Men shit.
It was she said it was, she never felt like he made her do stuff. She liked providing a home and being a wife and a mother. She said it was a pretty easy existence. They were comfortable. Her husband worked his way up the ladder and eventually became a Navy commander of an air group called the Screaming Eagles Fighter Squadron. And that also made Sybil the highest ranking military wife in the area. So she was also ranked very, very high. So she was always in charge of like the one who was hosting stuff. She would throw the dinners. She would throw the dances. She was like the one who everybody liked at the club. And,
yes. And all of the other wives had to live up to her.
Oh, yeah. So as Jim advanced his career, she decided she also wanted to further her education. So she was actually accepted to Stanford University.
Whoa, Stanford!
Yeah. And she got her master's in education. So she
wants to go back to work.
She wants to still teach. So at this moment, their life is pretty perfect. That's until Jim gets his deployment papers to respond to a conflict that was arising in Southeast Asia.
Uh-oh.
And this is the beginning of the Vietnam War. So before he left, Sybil threw him and the other men leaving like this huge fucking party. Everybody had, their convertibles out. She hired a band to play and they moved all the furniture out of the living room. They just threw this rager. She said it was a night of G&Ts, which was her favorite, and sidecars and Manhattans. There's some pictures of the party. Like someone's got like a wig on. She's barefoot. She's like dancing in the living room. Like it seemed like a really good party.
Yeah, they got loose.
Yeah, they did. So when Jim and the other men shipped off in 1965, Sybil had no idea that this would be the last time she would see her husband for the next 7 years.
7 years? Wow.
So to Sybil and her group of other military wives, she admitted like the Vietnam War just seemed like something very small and something very far away. And they were sure it'd be over for a few months and their husbands would come home. LBJ at the time was running his campaign called Rolling Thunder, which consisted of continual airstrikes on Vietnam. Mm. And with the excessive airstrikes, it doubled the chances of pilots getting shot down because you're sending out more planes. In 1 year, 105 pilots were shot down.
Jeez.
So over the next few months, reality sunk in as a few of the wives got reports back that their husbands had been shot down and that they were now MIA. What they didn't know, or what other people didn't know, was that the men were not just MIA. They had actually been captured and were now POWs. The military protocol was that they were able to tell the wives, but under the protocol that these women were supposed to abide by, they were not allowed to tell anyone else.
So they couldn't tell, like...
Not allowed to talk about it. Called it a code of silence. They were supposed to just say, they're just MIA, we don't know where they are, but they literally do know that their husbands are being held captive.
Huh.
In fact, in the book, The Navy Wife, it talks about how you will be held silent by the government if anything happens to your husband.
Huh.
Most of the wives would try to console one another, and little by little, they were like feeling each other out, and they discovered that they were all kind of suffering from the same thing. They weren't supposed to talk about it, but of course, if you see another person who's down, and you're down, and you begin to talk and share, I think you can kind of feel out that it's not a normal situation.
Yeah, and also, like, you need a support system.
Yeah.
When you're in a situation like that. It's kind of cruel to be like, oh, you can't have any support.
Yeah, because then you have to go out and go to the grocery store and act like everything's normal.
Yeah.
They tried appealing to the Navy, the government, even traveling to D.C. for answers of how to get their husbands rescued. There were no answers, and the State Department officials would treat them almost like an annoyance.
Ugh.
They would be like, oh, here comes these housewives again. They're all sad. Like, we've got bigger things to do over here.
As if a missing loved one isn't, in fact, the most important thing.
Especially somebody who's serving your fucking country for you. Oh my God.
Don't act like they're a nuisance.
So these women had no idea how to navigate the red tape, and almost all of what they were being told might as well have been in a foreign language. They didn't understand. They didn't know what any of these terms meant, any of the legality of it, how to even try to start.
Yeah, and I'm sure that was intentional.
Yeah. Most of the women said that they trusted the government and they went home to wait. They were really holding on to the fact that their husbands were prisoners to themselves, but like, hey, the government will take care of us, right?
Yeah.
They're doing something,
They'll go
right?
look for them.
Fuck no.
Really?
In September of 1965, Sybil joined that group of wives. She got news early one morning that Jim had been shot down and he was missing. She said she remembered that she didn't react. There was no tears, there was no wailing, she was just numb. She said it wasn't until later that night that she physically broke down, that she just started shaking uncontrollably all over and she had to have someone stay with her. She couldn't even go into her house. She slept on the porch.
So is he for sure missing, or is he also one of those POWs?
He's a POW. So she was informed, she had to keep quiet, and that, yes, in fact, Jim was a prisoner. The main thing she said they told her why they didn't want her saying anything was they said it might derail negotiations that the government was working on. So they said if we let people know that they are taking prisoners, and it might embarrass them. So we don't want to create any bad blood or something like that.
I see.
So for an entire year, she doesn't say anything.
To anyone? Not even the other wives?
No. She keeps it to herself.
Wow. It'd be so impossibly hard.
Oh, yeah. That would be damaging.
Yeah.
She ends up joining the group of the other wives whose husbands are MIA. And at first it is like guised as a support group until they all realize that they're all part of the same thing. All of their husbands are prisoners of war. So before there was any organizing, they would meet weekly under the title of just an officers' wives club. And so nobody thought it was a big deal. They just thought they were getting together and having lunch. And I'm a little iffy on this. It was hard to kind of figure out where the connect is for who this contact was. So Sybil finds out that some of the wives have made a contact in Vietnam and that they can get letters to their husbands. So they start sending coded letters, and it's in these letters that the women become aware that the men are being mistreated and they're actually being tortured.
Ah.
And at this point, they know more than the government knows about this torture. And so the government had assured the women that they were sure that the Geneva Convention guidelines were being followed. So they were saying, don't worry about it, because this has been established and they're being treated well.
I wonder if that's also just the line that they were giving them, and they did know full well what was really happening, but they didn't.
I wouldn't put it past at all.
I mean, they just wanted to keep it
quiet,
under wraps.
Yeah. Well, Sybil knew that wasn't true, and she learned through letters from Jim back and forth that he was being kept in solitary confinement for months at a time. He was held in leg irons for his first year that he was a prisoner. He was being routinely starved. He was being beaten and denied medical care. He actually, when his plane went down, his leg was injured very severely, and they denied him medical care, and it never healed properly. He actually suffered from it for the rest of his life. So Sybil comes to the conclusion that she can't stay silent. Like, no one's doing anything. Letting the public know that there were soldiers that were not only being held prisoner, but being tortured, it needed to come out. Yeah. It needed to be talked about.
People need to know that this is happening.
Oh, yeah. So in October of 1966, Sybil invites a group of wives to her home for lunch. And from that meeting, they agreed that they needed to organize not only into their own group, but she wanted to create a national league. She knew it was going to take numbers if they wanted to see any difference at all.
Yeah.
20 women and 20,000 is way different.
Difference. Yeah.
So Sybil worked to find other groups of women all across the country, prompting them to start their own chapters, which would eventually they would call the National League of Families of American Prisoners and Missing in Southeast Asia. It's a long title.
Yeah, I was like, what is the acronym for that? NEMLS.
I think they ended up calling it like the National League of Families for POW/MIA. She was elected their first national coordinator, and she began the first of dozens of trips that she would take to D.C. She and the League lobbied to Congress and the administration that they should abandon their keep quiet policy, publicly acknowledge the torture and the mistreatment of the American POWs, and put pressure on Northern Vietnam to actually abide by the Geneva Convention guidelines, because they're supposed to do that.
Yes, exactly. All of this is true. I'm like, yes, it should be public knowledge. Yes, they should be doing more. Yes, they should be holding North Vietnam accountable.
Oh, yeah. She began giving media interviews in direct violation of her code of silence. She didn't care. She's just like, fuck it. I'm going to do this anyway.
What are they going to do?
Yeah, what are you going to do?
It goes against the Constitution. She has the right to freedom of speech.
Absolutely. Well, she didn't care. And then she also said, they also told me to be quiet and not tell you, America. And that people were pissed. So pissed.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it basically is exactly what people fear, which is their government hiding what they're really doing.
Oh, yeah. She also drew attention to the fact that the wives and families whose husbands were missing were financially abandoned by the military as well.
Huh.
Yeah. So while the men are MIA, their financials are frozen. So their income and the ability for the wives to access the military savings are stunted. So not only are they losing their men, they cannot touch their husband's finances.
Why?
Which most of them are dependent on their husbands.
Yeah, because they don't work.
No, there was some stipulation of like if they're captured, they just freeze their stuff. And so Sybil was like, hey, there's families, there's children, there are people that need this money. And they were like, oh yeah, that's kind of like a weird clause. That probably shouldn't be in there. She's like, yeah, so fucking change it. Now, because
yesterday.
Yeah, and they literally were just like, oh yeah, that doesn't work for you, does it?
Oh, I guess that's not going to work out very well for all these families. My God.
No, it doesn't.
I could see the clause of it if it is truly MIA, where like you think somebody might have abandoned the company, right? Like that's a way to hold them accountable. Mm-hmm. But if you're aware that their plane got shot down and they're either dead or a prisoner, maybe we don't punish the family for the tragedy they're already going through.
Exactly. And who knows how long they'll have to wait and maybe eventually find out that they're dead.
Well, and some people who were MIA during the Vietnam War, no one ever knew what happened to them.
No.
There was never any closure.
No, there's still 1,600 unaccounted for soldiers.
Yeah.
That nobody knows what happened to them.
Right. So imagine if you were the wife of one of those soldiers and you just never got to have access to any of your benefits.
Nope.
That's unacceptable.
So yeah, she brought that to attention and she was able to get that clause removed.
Good for her.
She went on the road across the country, speaking at public events and coordinating a massive letter campaign to plead with members of Congress to publicly acknowledge and denounce the treatment of the soldiers. It wasn't until 1968, underneath Richard Nixon, he agreed to take action and made the nation's first public demands for the humane treatment of the prisoners. Sybil was invited to appear as the spokeswoman for the League and was granted a meeting with the president and Henry Kissinger to discuss ending the code of silence and what they could do to help these men come home. So Sybil said this after meeting with the president. She said, "I secretly felt that the organizational efforts of us wives and families on a national level had been influential in forcing our government to join us in speaking out publicly. One official in the Defense Department told me that they knew they'd better join us or we were going to mop the floor with them. And that's exactly how I wanted them to feel."
Good. Good for you.
She didn't stop there. She goes international.
Wow.
Yeah. She goes to the negotiations in Paris that led to the peace accords in 1973.
Whoa.
Yeah. She was part of a delegation that presented demands to the North Vietnamese. She brings along and drops 750,000 letters of protest and drops them at the North Vietnamese embassy in Paris. And this was part of the letter campaign that she had gone. And when she was going and speaking and rallying, she was getting people to write letters of protest.
And what exactly are the letters protesting? Protesting the treatment of the
Treatment of the soldiers.
It's interesting to me. I wonder where she stood on the issue of Vietnam in general, like the war itself.
I think part of it was when they said that she formed this group, she wanted to keep it not a political side.
Yeah, politically neutral.
Politically neutral, because she just said, these are just families that are being affected. Mm-hmm. These men are being abused. We just need to get them home. And the military needs to take care, and the government needs to take care of the people who have been left behind.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the part of the Vietnam War that is really hard to even, as somebody who didn't live in that time, very hard to wrap my brain around, is that there were a lot of people who were involuntarily sent to fight in Vietnam, mm-hmm. who had no desire to be there, did not believe in the war, and were then treated like they were criminals and pigs when they came home.
Yeah.
And I think that treatment of so many veterans at that time really poisoned American culture in a lot of ways.
Oh, it did. And it was the first that we had ever seen of when soldiers come home and then they were treated so badly.
Yeah, it's really difficult to understand why there was such a myopic point of view of the people who were anti-war. Mm-hmm. Like, you can be anti-war and not be anti-soldier.
Yeah.
I think that's harder now because it's voluntary. And so you are voluntarily representing the imperialist.
Yeah, you put your name on that paper.
Yep. You're voluntarily going in there with this imperialist government that wants to step on people.
That's interesting that you asked that, because through all of her writings and her speeches, she really didn't say what her view was on the actual war. It was very much, she had an issue with the government mm-hmm. and how they were dismissing how these people were being treated.
I'm so curious if privately she was anti-war. I mean, anti-Vietnam War. I would mm-hmm. say that it is almost universally believed at this point that it was a really terrible choice and it was a very bad war.
Oh, yeah.
And it wasn't worth anybody's time.
Got us nowhere.
And And the way that, and I think that, one of the things that happened with regards to the way that soldiers who were returning were treated, I think that there were quite a few media stories at the time that were really exposing some of the horrific things that soldiers were doing in Vietnam. And so
it literally brought out the worst from both sides.
It was just
bad. It dehumanized so many people.
It was really bad. And so again, I do understand that there were some people who were mad at the soldiers because they had been hearing and seeing the terrible things that some soldiers were doing. But I mean, I had heard I've read personal accounts of people who had been forced to go, particularly black men, young men who had been forced to be, they were drafted.
Yeah.
And they then returned to a country that hated them for being a Vietnam soldier and hated them for being black and hated them. And they couldn't even go to places, they couldn't go to veterans, like a VFW, and then they were spat on if they went into regular places.
Jeez.
So it's just all of that is so terrible and awful. And what a nightmare of a time.
Yeah.
I'm just curious what she would have thought at
where
the
she
time.
Stood.
Especially now that we know that it was just a bad war.
Oh, yeah.
Everything about it was
I would be pretty
false.
pissed if I lost 7 years of my partner's life with me.
Yeah, and
for no reason.
Permanently disabled from it.
Yeah. Well, she dropped off these letters of protest as a visual statement. Later on, one of her sons would say that she was actually really terrified to do that because, not only do they know who she is now, they know who her husband is and that they've been talking.
Yes.
Yeah. The North.
I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah, because they know who he is.
Yeah. Now he's a target.
I guess partly, I read a little bit of his story too. They wanted to use him as propaganda. They wanted to put him on video and just be like, you're going to say how well we're treating you. He actually, he took a razor and he cut himself up and beat himself so that they couldn't use his face on TV.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow. That's intense.
Yeah. So the North Vietnamese denied that the charges that they were abusing prisoners was, of course, not true. That's what they said. But on Jim's side, he said that once, kind of the heat was coming on and attention was coming towards them, that conditions did improve. And all the soldiers are what's going? He said it just stopped and nobody knew why. And they had no idea that their families were fighting for them back home. Oh. And Jim had no idea what Sybil was doing on a national and international level for him. Even though they were talking through the letters, it was very brief little things. It wasn't this big giant letter.
Well, and if she had revealed that that's what she was doing, I'm sure the communication would have ended immediately.
A League member named Karen Butler said, "We accomplished so much, and it all started around her dining room table. Sybil was just indomitable and tireless." It was in 1973 when over 600 POWs were released and sent back home, and Jim was one of them.
More than 600.
He had survived being a prisoner for over 7 years. After he returned home, he could barely stand. I did see a picture of him coming off the plane, meeting his family, and he is white as a sheet with black circles under his eye, and he's just gaunt. He looks like a shell of a person.
Yeah, I'm sure he was a shell of a person.
He stayed with the Navy, though, and was eventually promoted to admiral. He couldn't fly anymore just because of his leg. He was disabled. Most of the men who came home were not only shocked at how everything had changed, around in the world. People were so different. You're going from the 60s to now the early 70s. It's a big change. They had no idea that these women were did a big screw you to the government and broke their code of silence and worked really hard to get these guys' attention. The women were different too when the men came home.
Yeah, I bet they were.
And I think a lot of it, resulted in divorce just because it had been just a certain way. And also these men are mentally not the same anymore.
Yep.
So a lot of couples, it was really difficult for them to be completely reunited.
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, think of yourself 7 years ago. Are you the same person you were 7 years ago?
Heck no.
I mean, it would be impossible if you hadn't grown with your partner during those 7 years to just pick up where you left off.
Yeah.
I mean, everything would be so different. And you would have gotten so used to being independent.
Yeah.
And the woman that they left was very dependent and served their husband's every need.
Oh, yeah.
And now have become independent people with big voices and know how to...
And the realization to know that they can do it.
And they can do it. And so then their husbands are returning to a home that is not the same, and the women are not in that same position anymore.
Some men were like very, very vocal. Like, this is what my wife did for me. Jim was one of those men of just like, look what she did. She's amazing. Some were not. Yeah. Which I don't know why you would resent that.
I think you would if you were of the mindset that women should be seen and not heard.
True. True. Well, she continued her work for the League, helping families navigate military services, red tape, especially for younger families who are just brand new to the game and they don't know how to do this. She continued to lobby to change military protocols that do not look out for the best interests of military families. For her actions, Sybil was awarded the Navy's Distinguished Public Service Award. She still is the only military wife in history to receive that award with an active duty naval officer as a spouse. In 1984, Sybil and Jim co-wrote a memoir called In Love and War, documenting their stories side by side of what both of them went through those 7 years apart. So the memoir starts off from Jim's point of view, and then it'll trade a chapter, and then it's her point of view from that exact moment in time. So as you read through, you're just watching these two people and what they're both going through for all 7 years.
That's pretty cool.
It sounds fascinating. I read a book like that one time where it was about a relationship, and one chapter was one person's perspective, and it was the second chapter was that person's perspective in that same argument or that same moment. And it was really interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting to see like the same experiences from two different perspectives.
The government actually was really upset about the details that were in the book, and they actually tried to put a stop to it and not get it and force it to not be published.
Did they say it violated like Homeland Security or whatever?
Something like that, and they were just like there was too many details in there, but she was very plain as day in there, like the government really fucked us over. So I can imagine it kind of didn't put them into good of light. Yeah. But they published it anyway. They were like, screw you.
That's why we have a constitutional amendment.
And it was a very popular book. And it actually was made into a movie, which starred James Woods. And I don't know who the female actress was. But it was like a made-for-TV movie, like, where they do like 3 parts or something like that.
Yeah, miniseries.
Yeah.
James Woods is a dick.
I don't know much about him.
Yeah, he's like super right-wing now.
Oh, gross. Okay.
If I'm thinking the right guy, I'm pretty sure I am.
She continued to meet once a month with her original group of ladies until she died from Parkinson's disease around the age of 90. There was a fascinating book that was written called The League of Wives by Heath Hardage Lee. She's a fantastic writer. The book is really well written, and she really did her research. She dived into a lot of old papers that most of them are missing because I guess a lot of all of the work that they did, nobody was saving the documents.
They weren't keeping track of it, I'm sure.
No. And Heath Hardage Lee she's like, I can imagine they were just doing things in the heat of the moment and just plugging forward and just trying to survive. No one's thinking they're making history while they're making history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody knows they're making history when they're doing it. That's for sure.
Yes. But I got most of my information from her book and also from an interview that she did on a podcast called What's Her Name History. And that's also a Women of History's podcast.
Yeah, so if you like us, you probably like them.
Yeah, What's Her Name? I tried to find the 2 host names, but I was like, I can't find them, so what's her name? What's her name? But Heath Hardage Lee was a guest on there, and it was a really cool interview. But if you like history podcasts, which I think you do because you're listening to ours, go check them out. Also, I got info from a LA Times article written by Tony Perry called Sybil Stockdale Dies at 90 Years Old. Sybil Stockdale on being the wife of a POW from PBS.org. Her obituary from the Coronado Times. And an article called Sybil Stockdale, Fierce Activist by Bruce Weber for the New York Times. And actually, so the League of Wives book that Heath Hardage Lee wrote is being optioned for a movie by Reese Witherspoon's production company. So she's really hoping that will turn into something. Yeah. So she was like, hopefully coming soon, the League of Wives movie.
That would be neat.
Yeah. So I did know who Jim was because I had heard of his story because he was in the same POW camp as he was a senator.
John McCain?
John McCain.
Oh.
Yeah.
See, like the whole time I kept thinking, are these all pseudonyms for John McCain? I was like, I don't think so. I think that's just his actual name.
No. Yeah, it's James Bond Stockdale. So yeah, and then he actually ran in a presidential race with Ross Perot.
Oh, interesting.
He was Ross Perot's VP nom.
I had no idea.
Me neither.
I do recall when Ross Perot ran for president. I remember it being a very contentious issue in my household when my Aunt Wendy confessed that she had voted for him. And my mom, I thought, was going to flay her alive at the dinner table.
Is it one of those moments where you push your chair back away from the table?
Oh, yeah. My mom came.
Just become the floor.
My mom came absolutely unglued at my aunt.
Oh, my God.
You threw away your vote.
My goodness.
You're the reason we have Bill Clinton in office.
One thing that Heath Hardage Lee said, too, was that Sybil was the one who founded this League of Nations. But there was another woman who was kind of a champion that was part of the league they used to call her Fearless Phyllis.
Oh, I love
she
that.
has become more of like the front person, and Sybil people have kind of forgotten that she was the one that did all the footwork in the beginning.
Oh, I see.
I even went to the League of Families website, and it literally just says the spouse of a high-ranking naval officer. On the website, no sign of her name.
Oh my gosh.
She's not even recognized on the page.
Oh, that erasure is so hard to take.
And they were like, thanks to Ronald Reagan, who really pushed this program. He did it all. And I was like, what the fuck? Her name's not even on here?
That's upsetting.
Yeah, the main video on the home screen, they talk about how Ronald Reagan just used this program so well. And he did it all.
I'm gonna do a hardcore eyebrow raise at anybody who praises Ronald Reagan, who totally fucked our economy and a lot of other shit.
But just this image of this woman who was supposed to be, sticking to her tea parties and her brunches, and she was like, "No, I'm going to get out there and I'm going to actually make a difference." And I found her story really awesome.
That is really good, and also a wide departure from a lot of the stuff we end up covering on here. So I like that. A little different story today.
Yep.
Well, thank you for sharing and nice job.
Thank you.
Well, folks, we are at the end of another episode. So we're going to thank
Lucas McIntyre, editor. Thank you so much.
And Jennifer Finch of L7 for our amazing theme music. And all of you for listening.
All right, guys, and folks, and people, and persons.
Make sure you follow us on all the socials and support us on Patreon if you feel like it. We are at patreon.com/IDKHerPodcast. And we also have some merch up on TeePublic.
Get some.
Please do.
All right. Till next time, folks.
Goodbye.